Post Gloves here, and this is another video in the Harmor from the Ground Up tutorial series. And today we're going to be talking about the effects section in Harmor. So this is a pretty neat option. I really like what they have here. It's simple, it's to the point, gets your stuff done fast, and it allows you to snap things on here really quick. So why use the effects section in Harmor? You'll find out very soon. So we have 4 modules in here, well 5: compression, reverb, delay, chorus, and distortion. So I'm going to start out with distortion. So we have a note, and distortion is, so what I've learned as far as being the definition of distortion is whenever a value shifts to a value that it shouldn't shift to. Like for example, it's like you have quantization distortion, where it gets pushed to a value that it shouldn't be, or a value that should not be happening. It is something that is noticeable and usually occurs in a pattern, whereas noise is just random. Distortion is very intentional, very in one direction. I have a whole video on distortion, and the saturation is basically just like light distortion. There's all different types of distortion. Distortion follows, like I just said, a pattern. It follows some sort of set of rules. And so this is to an analog days. So in the digital domain, when you distort and you hit the 0 value, called clipping, a whole bunch of things happen with square waves and a whole bunch of other junk, and that's like a whole nother topic. But this is to simulate distortion so that you can get different types without peaking, because otherwise you'd be limited to the types you have. So this will take our data and interpolate it and push values that normally wouldn't go. This is very gain based, but it can be frequency related as well. Go towards one direction or the other. So that's sort of a bit. I have a whole thing on the wave shaper. I have a wave shaper video on my channel that explains sort of how that works. That may give you a better insight on what distortion is, what it's doing to your sound. But we have a whole bunch of different things here. We have all these different types. We have bit crush, sign crush, bit jam. Some of these are giving away what they're doing, and that's kind of what they want you to understand what they're doing. Like bit jam, bit crush, I'm willing to put money on it. That is just it just reduces the amount of quantization steps you have in your bit depth. We'll just look at some of these. I use this a ton. Super awesome sounding stuff in here. We have hill. So as we turn up our amount, this is the amount that will be implemented, how much of this is happening to our sound. Now it should be noted that effects are time-based. All effects, I've not seen an additive effect yet. What that means is that these are not additive processes. These are after the fact this is technically a subtractive process. You're shaping the data we've been given. Except for now, it's been converted to an audio signal. Because it goes through, it's a DSP thing. It goes through a process, an algorithm, and it spits out a value. So it has to be calculated. So it is a time-related effect. So as we push stuff, you can hear it becomes more of a square wave. You can see up here our square wave is showing, and we get a pretty clear image that of a very unique shape. It's not a perfect square wave. It seems to be sharp, and then it bends off. So if we come down an octave or two. So that's kind of interesting. I will go ahead and open up a wave candy and turn the color all the way up. And so we have this asymmetry. This is has to do with DC offset. So it'll push so right now the average values have been calculated to go in this 0 crossing. This can eat your headroom if you're not careful, but sometimes it creates some really unusual timbres that I really like. So as we're doing this, see our values get pushed to the maximum and minimum, and sometimes even 0 crossing in unusual ways. If we push it up, right now we have nothing because we've pushed it to the max and it's all the way off. So it has to do with the value. So if it's always 0 or 1, it eventually reaches a threshold where you just don't hear it. So you actually can't go all the way on asymmetry. And this, as you see, gives us a stereo spread. So some interesting options for manipulating the average around the zero crossing is essentially what asymmetry is doing. And then we have this wet dry. So how much of this? So we have the amount of distortion happening, but then we have the mix essentially is what this is. Obviously it can affect our volume. We have another option for mix which further does it, and they give us a filter. It allows us to control what frequencies this is affecting, and we have a mix slider here. Which allows us to give us very specific control over what our filter is doing. So you have all these different types. I recommend using them. They all sound, well, some of them sound similar under certain circumstances, but they all have very different sounds. As you can see, there's definitely quantization of bit depth happening here. So that's a thing. So next up, we have this chorus option. Chorus is less intensive on your CPU than unison, because unison is a per note. Chorus is a per voice. So, or I might have these backwards. But anyways, it can accomplish a lot of what unison does with far less CPU usage. Unison is very specific, and you saw some of the envelope options we have. So we have some unusual things we can do with unison, but a lot of times chorus is sufficient. And so recommend using chorus if your CPU is a concern. And as we hit some notes here, so we have order. That's just the amount of voices that are generated. So we have 9 voices, very similar to unison. Depth is, so chorus works. It's I have a whole video on chorus. I'm just gonna refer you to that video. So this is essentially the same thing as the video I have on chorus, the Fruity Chorus video. It's just go look up Fruity Chorus. It's on there, and you can learn what chorus does. You have a whole bunch of different options here for you. See, chorus is very similar to flanging, and in some cases, it's almost the same thing. So you can select different presets already made for you here. And you have your cross, so it's a stereo image, spread, more stereo image. Okay, so we have delay down here. So it will take your signal, so it's like an echo when you hear delay. So if we turn it on, and you have to turn them on using these little things right here. When they turn green, it's on. And you can hear it going. You can, so we have Pong mode, invert mode, and normal mode. This is, normal I believe is left to right. Or it might be unison and then inverted. And then I believe Pong is left speaker, right speaker, left speaker, right speaker. It influences how your speakers interact. We have stereo width, and as you can see, we can take the data and reverse it and introduce that as delay. So that's kind of interesting. We have a feedback filter, which allows us to control how much of this feedback, and we can filter the feedback as it comes in and out. And you see this one's a high pass, this one's a low pass. And so that is a pretty interesting option. If you turn feedback up all the way, it will never stop. So that's important to know about. Time introduces the amount of time it takes. You can get some hints and sync it up with your tempo using your hint bar up here. And then we have an offset. And that does some pretty obvious effects. If you're creating swing or something, you may want that. So that's pretty cool. And then we have reverb. Reverb has we have a whole bunch of different matrices for this: band, side, far, wide. I don't even know if I'm saying the right words for these letters. But basically, reverb is you're in a space and you have direct sound hitting you, you have early reflections hitting you, and you have very late reflections, and they're perceived to be coming from everywhere. This can reduce intelligibility in sounds, but you know, it's like reverb, like what you would expect. You can get pretty outrageous with it. So there's your reverb. We have some options here. We also have filters similar to the filters over here. So we can filter our reverb, which again, this is another time-based effect. They're all time-based effects, except for perhaps compression, which is delay, which is still technically has to go through a circuit. So we have this mysterious del again. It's the pre-delay, delay. It's the amount of time it takes for the effect to be introduced once you've hit your note. So So you can use this to make pre-delay, and that's kind of interesting. You can go up and down on it. But you can also do that here, I guess, with another thing. So this must just be delay. So the amount of time it takes to get introduced into it. So that can make your space be perceived as bigger because you hit a note and then the reverb hits you. So that can be used to create a very big sounding effect, and you get another hint bar to set that timing to your desire. I'm not really sure if you want to do that. Maybe sync it up with your song so that the pre-delay is in sync. That'd be kind of cool. Size. So this just simulates the size of your room. And this introduces the way it's matrixed in, I believe. That could be pretty important. We have decay. So just how long your reverb is, how long it takes to decay. Decay time's actually technically, I believe it's the amount of time it takes to decrease. So if you were to hit a transient, it's the amount of time the reverb takes to decrease below 60 decibels. So with a much longer decay time, it takes a way longer time. Dampening, which will just dampen the lower frequencies. Whenever you see dampening, it pretty much means a high cut. And then we have this wet knob, which is just, it's a mix knob essentially. So how wet or dry your signal is. So affected or unaffected your signal is by this effect. As you can see, very effective. And it's interesting again that you can go up and down. I don't know if this reverses the effect technically, but moving it across the zero value may give you some interesting effects. The last thing we have here is compression. I'm not going to give like a lesson on compression here because it's like crazy. But yeah, you can limit. You have a limiter option, warming, heating, and burning. Amount essentially is your threshold. You have no control over ratio or need. You just sort of pick your preset. And it is technically a multi-band, I guess. And they give you some shapes here. You could think of this as an EQ compressor if you're familiar with that. If you're not familiar with compressors, you should go get familiar with compressors. But you can, so you have your threshold. And this will... So what a compressor does, just in a nutshell, super fast, is it takes a value, so say you have some stuff coming in at like 100 decibels, something like pretty loud, and you turn your compression ratio up to like 2:1, and you set the threshold at like 90. What this means is that only 95 decibels will be coming out of your 100 decibel signal. You might be saying like, what the heck are you talking about? Like, this might be too technical for you. I don't know. It's pretty basic, but the ratio is every 2 decibels it goes over the threshold, you get cut by a decibel. So if it's a 2:1 ratio, since we have 10 decibels over our 90 decibel threshold, we'll go back to 95 because we'll only get half of what went over. A limiter has a very high ratio, so if it was like a 10:1, we'd only get 91 decibels because we went 10 decibels over and we get 1 decibel out. And so that is what, in a very, very basic sense, like without even regard to mixing. But this is different because this also gives you control over the makeup gain, and it's a multi-band. So this is sort of a little more advanced, and it's a far less intuitive option. But it can let you do some pretty basic in the plugin EQ adjustments. So that can be pretty fundamental to maybe what you want to do. I used to touch this for the longest time without even knowing what compression was. And so that's just, if you want to know, I'll open up a Maximus right here to give you a better idea. So here's a Maximus, and a level will come in, and I can take it and I can like press it down to give it a, as you can see, here's the purple value represents the value it's at, and it's being pushed down by this ratio I've set. This is a very unique compressor with this sort of a graphing option. A lot of them just have a thing called threshold and another thing called ratio, but here the ratio, we're given really huge amounts of control over it with our graph here. And we could take it down, and then what you do is you apply makeup gain. So we've compressed it down, and then you makeup gain it, so post gain, and you get your volume back. And the idea is you can take your highs or your mids if they're too soft, and you can bring them up with the rest of your sound. And so that's what this is used for. Heating, burning, and warming are, I bet, just different ratios. And then limiting is just a limiter. So it essentially sets a line, and anything that goes over that line gets pushed down. I know I've just explained limiting, but that's like a really simple way of looking at it. So this is essentially like a volume EQ, sort of like an intense EQ, because EQs already do volume controls. So anyways, yeah, compression is a whole nother topic. There's a whole bunch of debates about how to use it. You can definitely overdo it, but if you're using it as from just a creative sound design, just see what's going to happen perspective, you don't need to worry about all that other junk between like psychoacoustic phenomena, all that stuff. All that stuff's beneficial. But when you're doing it from a sound designing perspective, you take a whole nother look on compression. It's basically just another effect in your box rather than trying to make your mix sound clean. Because then you can compress it after and do the academic mixing, and now I'm mixing compression to it. So that's that. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. If you have anything that you like, maybe a favorite setup you like to use with these, drop that in the comments. Subscribe and have a blessed day.